The dust settled slow in this forgotten corner of the world. It coated everything, the sun-bleached sign for Earl's Gas and Sundries, the cracked asphalt of the highway that saw more tumbleweeds than traffic, and the worn, canvas backpack resting by the side of the building. Next to the backpack sat Martha. She wasn't much to look at, folks usually thought. An older woman, clothes clean but threadbare, a quiet stillness about her that most mistook for weariness. Her hands, clasped loosely in her lap, were gnarled with age and exposure, yet held a surprising steadiness. Her eyes, though, beneath the brim of a faded cap, missed nothing. They were the eyes of a hawk, ancient and sharp, constantly scanning, assessing, cataloging. She lived simply, moving from place to place, finding quiet spots where the world didn't bother her, and she, in turn, didn't bother the world. Earl, the owner of the gas station, was one of the few who saw past the surface. He was an old man himself, seen his share of life, including a stint in the service decades ago. He recognized the quiet discipline in Martha, the way she held herself, the economical movements. He didn't pry, but he'd offer her a cup of coffee, sometimes a sandwich, and let her sit in the shade by his building. This dusty stretch of highway hadn't always been peaceful. Lately, a shadow had fallen over it, a group calling themselves the Vipers. They were a local gang, low-level thugs mostly, but cruel and emboldened by a recent surge in numbers and a connection to something larger, something darker, whispered about in worried tones. They extorted the few businesses left, intimidated travelers, and generally made life miserable for anyone who couldn't fight back. Earl had paid them off twice already, the cost cutting deeper into his already slim profits. He knew it wouldn't be long before they demanded more. Martha had seen them around. Fast cars, loud mouths, too much swagger. She'd observed their patterns, their weak points, their arrogance. She saw the fear they sowed in the few people who stopped here, the way Earl flinched when their cars sped by. She watched, and she waited. She had hoped to keep waiting, to remain invisible, to just pass through like the dust in the wind. But some things, she knew, you couldn't just let pass. One sweltering afternoon, the peace shattered. A beat-up Camaro with a snake decal on the door screeched into Earl's lot. 3 men spilled out, leather vests, crude tattoos, radiating menace like the heat off the asphalt. The biggest one, Scar, so-called for a jagged line across his cheek, swaggered towards the gas station door. Earl came out, wiping his hands on a rag, his face etched with worry. Well, looky here, Scar sneered, spitting on the ground near Earl's feet. Time for your weekly contribution, old man. And maybe a little extra for our trouble this time. Earl swallowed, his gaze darting towards Martha, who remained seated by the wall, seemingly oblivious, head slightly bowed. I don't have much today, Scar. Business is slow. Another Viper, twitchy and younger, shoved a hand into Earl's chest. Slow? Maybe we need to speed it up for you. Make an example. Martha's eyes lifted slightly. They were calm, but the intense focus was now visible. Scar's gaze swept across the lot, landing on her. A cruel grin spread across his face. Hey, look at this, he said, nudging the twitchy Viper. Got a new transient? You feeding the bums now, Earl? Maybe she's got something for us. He started walking towards Martha, his companions chuckling. Leave her be, Scar, Earl said, his voice tight. She's no trouble. Scar ignored him, stopping a few feet from Martha. He leaned down, invading her space. The smell of stale sweat and cheap cologne was thick. Hey, old lady. Got any loose change? Or maybe something shiny? What's that you got there? His eyes fixed on the thin silver chain around her neck, visible where her shirt collar was slightly open. He reached out a dirty finger to hook it. Don't, Martha said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the afternoon heat like ice. Scar laughed, a harsh, grating sound. Don't? Or what, Grandma? You gonna gum me to death? He grabbed the chain, yanking hard. It snapped, pulling a tarnished metal dog tag into his hand. He held it up, examining it with mock curiosity. Ooh, looky. A military tag. What, your daddy a soldier? Or your husband? Probably dead, like most things around here, he sneered, raising his hand as if to toss it into the dust. That was the moment. The quiet stillness around Martha evaporated, replaced by a sudden, coiled energy. Scar never saw it coming. Her hand shot out, not towards the tag, but towards his wrist, a blur of movement. Her grip was instant, iron. Scar yelled, dropping the tag as a searing pain shot up his arm. Before he could react, Martha was on her feet, fluid and fast. Her other hand drove into his solar plexus, a short, sharp strike. Scar doubled over, gasping, the sneer replaced by agony. The twitchy viper lunged at her. Martha pivoted, using Scar's hunched form as a shield for a fraction of a second. As the viper cleared Scar, Martha met him not with a block, but a bone-jarring open-handed strike to the side of his head. He staggered, disoriented. The third viper hesitated for just a second too long. Martha closed the distance, moving with an impossible speed for someone who looked like her. She ducked under his wild swing and delivered a swift, precise strike to the base of his neck, followed by a knee to the groin. He crumpled with a choked cry. The twitchy viper was recovering, raising his fists. Martha stepped towards him, her posture low, balanced. She didn't look angry, just intensely focused. Her movements were efficient, lethal. A quick parry deflected his punch, followed by a complex sequence of blocks and strikes, a wrist lock that made him howl, a pressure point strike to his elbow, ending with a hard, clean punch to his jaw. He dropped like a stone. Scar, still trying to catch his breath, watched in stunned silence, clutching his wrist. The frail-looking old woman who moments ago seemed harmless had just taken down his three toughest men in seconds, without breaking a sweat. Her eyes, when she looked at him, held a chillingly calm intensity. "Pick up the tag," Martha said, her voice still quiet, but carrying the weight of absolute command. Scar stared at her, fear creeping into his eyes. He scrambled back, away from her. The dog tag lay forgotten in the dust where he'd dropped it. You crazy old hag," he stammered, backing towards the Camaro. "You don't know who you just messed with. The vipers will kill you for this." Martha walked slowly towards the tag, not taking her eyes off Scar. She bent down, picked it up, brushing the dust off the familiar surface. It bore the name, PFC, R. Miller, and a service number. Not hers. Not her husband's either. A past life. A debt. "Run along, Scar," she said, securing the tag under her shirt again. "Tell your leader that this road is closed." To him. Scar didn't need telling twice. He scrambled into the Camaro, fumbling with the keys, leaving his stunned, injured men in the dust. The car roared to life and sped away, tires squealing, disappearing down the highway as fast as it had arrived. Earl stood by his door, mouth agape. He looked from the retreating car to Martha, who was now calmly retrieving her backpack. He'd seen things in the service, but nothing like that. Not from an older woman who looked like she belonged in a rocking chair. "Martha," he breathed, "what in the world?" Martha slung the backpack over her shoulder. "Just passing through, Earl," she gave him a small, knowing look. Seems this road needed a little clearing. The encounter at Earl's Gas and Sundry sent tremors through the local underworld. Scar, humiliated and injured, reported back to Marcus Thorne, the leader of the Vipers. Thorne was a man who built his reputation on fear and absolute control. That some seemingly random old woman had single-handedly dismantled his crew in a public display was an affront he couldn't tolerate. An old woman? Thorne sneered, pacing his grubby office above a defunct bar. You're telling me Scar, my top enforcer, and 2 others got put down by some dusty grandmother? She wasn't. She wasn't normal, boss, Scar insisted, cradling his still aching wrist. Fast. Strong. Like a ghost, boss. Knew exactly where to hit. Didn't even look like she was trying hard. Thorne stopped pacing. A cold, calculating look entered his eyes. Amateurs relied on brute force. Professionals relied on skill. And whatever this woman was, she was no amateur. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about his authority, his image. He couldn't afford to look weak. He needed information. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why was she here? Martha, meanwhile, knew the Vipers wouldn't let it go. That wasn't how these things worked. Especially not with Thorne in charge. She wasn't just passing through anymore. She had made a stand, and now she had to see it through. She couldn't let them terrorize Earl or anyone else here, just because she had interrupted their petty tyranny. She spent the next few days quietly gathering information. Using old habits honed over years of operational deployments, she observed the town, the flow of people, the areas the Vipers frequented. She listened to the hushed conversations in the diner, the wary glances exchanged on the street. She learned Thorne wasn't just a local thug, he was running a small but lucrative operation, a network of petty crime, and disturbing rumors suggested a growing connection to a larger organization, perhaps a state-level crime syndicate, maybe even something more. The dog tag she wore wasn't just a memento, it represented a promise made long ago, a life dedicated to protecting the innocent and confronting those who preyed upon them. This town, she realized, desperately needed protection. Her initial act of defense had been a spark, but it wasn't enough to win a war. She needed help. She needed allies. She thought of Earl. He was brave, in his own quiet way. And he had mentioned the service. Martha approached Earl cautiously. She found him late one evening, tallying receipts, the worry lines on his face deeper than usual. "Earl," she said softly. He looked up, startled. "Martha. Didn't hear you come in. Everything all right?" "They'll be back," she stated plainly. "Thorne won't let this stand." Earl sighed, running a hand over his bald head. "Yeah. I figured. Always comes back worse, doesn't it?" "We can fight them," Martha said. Earl looked at her, a skeptical but hopeful light in his eyes. "We?" "Martha, what? What were you, before? Out there?" Martha met his gaze directly. "I served. For a long time. In places where things were complicated. My job was to solve complicated problems." With precision, she paused. "I saw your service flag, Earl. And the way you look at people. You know what's right." A flicker of understanding passed between them. Earl straightened up slightly, a hint of old military bearing returning. "Quartermaster Corps," he said. "Not exactly front line, but I know logistics. And how to handle certain equipment." A slow smile spread across his face. "So. You got a plan, soldier?" Earl knew a few others too. A couple of retired mechanics who were surprisingly good shots, a former police officer forced into early retirement after trying to root out corruption, and a quiet woman who ran the local diner and possessed an uncanny ability to gather gossip and had a formidable way with a baseball bat when provoked. They weren't soldiers, not like Martha, but they were decent people, fed up with living in fear. Martha met with them in the back room of Earl's station. The air was thick with determination and a healthy dose of apprehension. Martha spoke quietly, outlining the situation, the likely threat, and the necessity of taking the fight to Thorne. "He won't stop until we're gone or broken," she explained. "Waiting for him is a losing game. We need to make him regret ever stepping foot on this road." She spoke of Thorne's operations, the places he ran his small drug dealing from, the warehouse where stolen goods were fenced, the routes his men used. She proposed hitting them where it hurt, disrupting his business, showing him he wasn't invincible. Earl added his knowledge of the local area, the old roads and hidden paths. The mechanic knew about their cars and preferred hangout spots. The former officer had insights into police response times and blind spots. The diner owner knew who was loyal to Thorne and who just wanted peace. The alliance solidified not just on shared purpose, but on a growing respect for Martha. Her calm competence, her strategic mind, her unwavering resolve inspired them. She wasn't asking them to fight for her, she was showing them how to fight for themselves, for their home. As Martha and her nascent team began planning, Thorne was also consolidating his position. The humiliation at the gas station demanded a response beyond simple retribution. He needed to send a message. He needed to remind everyone who was in charge. He put out feelers to his connections in the syndicate. His small operation was just a tributary, but it generated steady income. He requested backup, some experienced muscle to deal with this unexpected problem. They sent him 2 men, cold-eyed professionals who arrived without fanfare. They weren't vipers, they were wolves, quiet and dangerous. Their presence alone changed the dynamic. The stakes had just gone up significantly. Find her, Thorne ordered his men, including the new arrivals. Find the old woman. Find anyone helping her. Make an example. A brutal one. Let this whole damn town see what happens when you cross Marcus Thorne. The Vipers and the new enforcers began tightening their grip. More visible patrols, more aggressive shakedowns. They vandalized a small store whose owner had spoken out against them previously, beating the man badly. Fear, thick and suffocating, began to settle back over the town like the dust. One of Martha's potential allies, a young man whose car had been stolen by the Vipers, got cold feet after the beating. He came to Earl, shaken. "It's too much," he stammered. "They're serious. I can't risk my family." Earl listened, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Nobody's asking you to do anything you can't handle, son. Everyone has their limits. Just don't let them win by scaring you into silence." Martha had anticipated this. She knew not everyone could stand and fight. Her plan relied on a core group, not the entire town. But the fear, the increased brutality from Thorne, confirmed their course of action was necessary. The problem wouldn't go away on its own. It would only grow. Standing in the quiet back room with her small team, Earl, the mechanics, the former officer, the diner owner, Martha looked at their determined, weary faces. "Thorne thinks fear is his weapon," she said, her voice low. "And it is, for now. But it runs out. What they did today. That wasn't strength. That was desperation. They're showing us they're scared too. Scared of losing control." She unrolled a simple map of the town and surrounding area, marking locations with quiet precision. Thorne's main hangout, the warehouse, the routes. We hit them fast. Multiple points. Disrupt their operations. Show them they can't hide, can't control everything. We don't need to take them all out at once. We just need to break their confidence. Make them make mistakes. The plan was audacious, requiring split-second timing and perfect execution from people who weren't seasoned operatives. But it leveraged their strengths, local knowledge, unexpected skills, and a burning desire for justice. Earl would handle communications and coordination from the station. The mechanics would deal with the Vipers' cars and act as lookouts. The former officer would provide insights into security setups. The diner owner would manage distractions and keep an eye on key movements. Martha would lead the direct action, hitting the most vital targets herself, relying on her unique skill set. "This isn't just about driving out a gang," Martha said, her gaze sweeping over her allies. "It's about taking back our home. It's about showing them that respect isn't taken with fear, it's earned with courage. She touched the dog tag under her shirt briefly, a silent acknowledgement of the past, of the price of freedom and security. Are you with me? There were nods, quiet affirmations. Fear was still present, a cold knot in their stomachs, but overridden by a fierce, quiet resolve. They were ready. The time for waiting was over. If you are enjoying this story, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, and your support means the world to us. Also, tell us where you are watching from in the comments below. Now back to our story. The plan went into motion under the cloak of darkness. Martha moved like a shadow, silent and unseen. Her targets were Thorne's drug stashes and illegal goods at the warehouse. The mechanics, working separately, disabled key Viper vehicles parked at known hangouts, flattening tires, cutting brake lines, ensuring a slow or non-existent response when things kicked off. The diner owner created a diversion near the bar where Thorne usually held court, a loud, public argument that drew the attention of the Vipers guarding the entrance. Martha reached the warehouse undetected. The two syndicate enforcers Thorne had brought in were inside, along with a couple of Vipers. They were complacent, confident that few would dare cross Thorne. Their overconfidence was their first mistake. Martha slipped through a high window, dropping silently to the floor. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with crates and shrouded forms. She moved like a predator, using the environment to her advantage. She located the primary stash first, not taking it, but rendering it useless in a way that wouldn't be immediately obvious: subtle contamination, carefully placed accelerants that would burn hot and fast when ignited later. One of the Vipers yawned loudly, stretching. Martha was behind him in an instant. A quick, sharp blow to a nerve cluster on his neck rendered him unconscious before he could make a sound. She secured him, then moved on, locating the second Viper. The two enforcers were in a back office, talking in low tones. Martha listened from the shadows. They weren't just muscle, they were here to evaluate Thorne, decide if his operation was worth incorporating more fully into the syndicate. They spoke of expanding, controlling this whole highway stretch. The stakes were even higher than she thought. She couldn't take them both head-on without risking a protracted fight that might draw unwanted attention. She needed precision. Using her environment, she caused a controlled distraction, a cascade of falling boxes in a far corner. As one enforcer went to investigate, his partner remaining wary, Martha moved. She took down the investigator first, swiftly and silently in the aisle, using a chokehold that put him to sleep in seconds. The remaining enforcer, alerted by the commotion, drew a weapon, scanning the shadows. He was good, disciplined. But Martha was better. She used the warehouse layout, her knowledge of angles and cover. She circled, waited for her moment. He was too focused on the ground level. Martha dropped from a catwalk above, landing behind him. A sharp, incapacitating strike to his spine, then a quick cuffing using zip ties she carried. She wasn't here to kill, not unless she absolutely had to. Just to neutralize. With the enforcers and the Vipers secured, Martha finished her work in the warehouse, ensuring the goods were unusable and placing small, timed incendiary devices. A silent signal to Earl via a simple coded message confirmed the first phase was complete. Back in town, Thorne received a frantic call from his bar guards. "Boss. There was a fight. Distraction. I think the old woman's here." Thorne roared into the phone. "Don't let her get away. I'm coming." He gathered his remaining loyal Vipers and sped towards the bar, leaving his main base relatively exposed. This was exactly what Martha intended. While Thorne was chasing phantoms, Earl and the former officer made their move on Thorne's base of operations, the defunct bar itself. The disabled vehicles outside meant limited escape options for anyone inside. They weren't going in guns blazing. Their goal was reconnaissance, disrupting communications, maybe securing evidence Thorne kept there. The Vipers, finding no sign of Martha at the bar after the diversion, were growing frustrated and jumpy. Thorne arrived, furious. "Where is she?" he snarled. "You fools let her get away." Just then, the first wisps of smoke began to rise from the direction of the warehouse on the edge of town, followed shortly by the dull thud of small explosions and the distant wail of sirens, a different kind of siren, not local police, but maybe county or state, alerted by the fire. Thorne's eyes widened in disbelief and rage. The warehouse. She hit the warehouse. Panic began to set in. Their money, their goods, going up in smoke. And sirens. This wasn't just some local nuisance, this was a coordinated attack. "Earl, the warehouse is burning," Martha reported quietly over a secure channel, a simple walkie-talkie network set up by Earl. "Got it, Martha." Thorne just took most of his men towards the bar, but he's probably headed back now. We got into his office. Found ledgers, contacts, some disturbing photos. Got a copy made, secured the originals, that was the former officer's work, invaluable evidence the police needed to build a case. Good. The enforcers are secured too. They won't be a problem. She took down the syndicate's muscle? Earl whispered, impressed. They were sloppy, Martha replied. Got cocky. The town, witnessing the smoke from the warehouse and the sudden activity, watched with a mixture of fear and dawning hope. The Vipers were being hit. Someone was fighting back. Thorne, realizing the bar might have been a trap or a distraction, raced back towards the warehouse district, only to see the flames licking at the sky. His supply lines were burning. His hired muscle was silent. His panic turned to cold fury. He knew who was responsible. She wants a fight? Thorne snarled, slamming his fist on the dashboard. I'll give her one. Get everyone back to the main yard. Now. The main yard was a fortified junk electrical substation on the outskirts of town, a grim, concrete and wire fortress the Vipers used as their primary stronghold and meeting place. It was defensible, isolated, and filled with enough scrap metal and hazards to make any assault difficult. Thorne planned to dig in, force Martha to come to him, and overwhelm her with numbers and firepower. This is exactly what Martha had anticipated. Thorne's predictable reaction, his need to retreat to his stronghold, was part of her final play. Earl and the mechanics had been busy. They hadn't just disabled cars, they had prepared the routes to the main yard. Caltrops, strategically placed obstacles, even a small, remote detonated explosive charge rigged to collapse a section of an old access road. He's heading to the yard, Earl confirmed. Looks like everyone he's got left is with him. They're spooked, Martha. Good, Martha replied. Jumpy men make mistakes. Initiate Phase 3-inch. Phase 3 involved creating a gauntlet. As Thorne's vehicles raced towards the substation, they encountered the obstacles. Tires blew, engines stalled. The Vipers were forced to abandon their cars, proceeding on foot, frustrated and vulnerable on the open road leading to the yard. This slowed them down, strung them out, and forced them to abandon heavier weapons left in the vehicles. Meanwhile, the community, witnessing the spectacle from a distance, the smoke, the sirens, the Vipers scrambling on foot, felt a surge of defiance. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something new, hope. People who had been hiding in their homes emerged cautiously, watching from windows. Some, emboldened, called in tips to the non-corrupt county sheriff's office, reporting the Vipers' movements. The core team wasn't just Martha and Earl's group anymore. The former police officer had discreetly contacted a few trusted colleagues in the county system, providing snippets of the evidence found in Thorne's office and hinting at the larger criminal ties. Now, with the warehouse fire providing undeniable proof of illicit activity and multiple witnesses reporting the armed gang members, the sheriff's department was mobilizing, though they were still minutes away. Martha and her allies were already in position around the substation. It wasn't a frontal assault. Martha believed in asymmetric warfare. They used the terrain, the darkness, and the chaos of the Viper's disordered arrival. As Thorn and his men finally reached the substation yard, exhausted and enraged, they found no obvious attackers. Just silence, and the glint of moonlight on twisted metal and broken glass. "Spread out." Thorn barked, his voice hoarse. "She's in here somewhere. Find her." But Martha wasn't just somewhere. She was everywhere, it seemed. Using her knowledge of infiltration and close-quarters combat in complex environments, she moved through the maze of discarded equipment and crumbling structures like a predator. The fighting began not with a bang, but with a series of sharp, focused bursts of action. A Viper guard disappeared from his post, taken down silently. Another fell from a walkway, incapacitated by a precise strike. Martha's allies weren't idle either. The mechanics, positioned on a hill overlooking the yard, used high-powered air rifles to take out yard lights, plunging sections into darkness and adding to the confusion. The former officer provided covering fire from a distance, targeting legs and arms, avoiding fatal shots where possible, his aim steady. The Vipers, disoriented and under attack from unseen assailants, began firing wildly. Their discipline collapsed. This was Thorn's weakness. His men were bullies, not soldiers. They panicked when the tables were turned. Thorn raged, trying to regain control. He saw movement, fired his pistol, hitting only scrap metal. He knew Martha was the key. He had to find her, silence her. He moved deeper into the yard, towards the central control building, a small, reinforced structure where he felt safest. He had a couple of his most loyal, and terrified, Vipers with him. Martha anticipated this retreat. The control building was her target. Not just to get Thorn, but because she knew, from the evidence Earl's ally had found, that he kept important documents and maybe even hostages there. She intercepted Thorn and his men as they approached the building entrance. It was the most direct confrontation yet, illuminated fitfully by the burning warehouse in the distance and the remaining yard lights. "There!" Thorn yelled, spotting her. "Get her!" Two Vipers charged. Martha didn't retreat. She moved into the attack, low and fast. She parried the first man's clumsy knife thrust, twisting his arm and using his momentum to throw him into the second Viper, sending them both sprawling. Before they could recover, she delivered incapacitating strikes to each, ending the immediate threat. Thorn raised his pistol, aiming. He was shaking, his face contorted with fear and hatred. "You old hag! I'll blow your head off." Martha didn't flinch. She didn't have a firearm, relying on her hands, her skill. But she had something Thorn didn't expect. "Marcus Thorn," a voice boomed over a bullhorn from outside the yard. "This is the county sheriff's department. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and surrender." Thorn froze, startled. Surrounded? How? His escape routes were cut, his men scattered, and now the police were here. Martha used that split-second distraction. She charged Thorn, moving with astonishing speed. He squeezed the trigger, but the shot went wide as Martha closed the distance. She deflected his gun hand, the shot echoing in the yard. Then, she was on him, a whirlwind of focused energy. Not a brutal beatdown, but a precise, targeted takedown. She disarmed him with a painful twist, delivered a series of rapid strikes that left him stunned and gasping, and finished with a joint lock that brought him howling to his knees. "It's over, Thorn," Martha said, her voice calm, authoritative. The remaining Vipers in the yard, demoralized, injured, and now facing the arrival of armed law enforcement, began dropping their weapons and surrendering. The syndicate enforcers were found, still secured, bewildered and angry. The county sheriff, a stern, by-the-book woman named Sheriff Miller, no relation to the dog Tag, entered the yard cautiously with her deputies. She saw the scene, the incapacitated vipers, the secured enforcers, Thorn on his knees, held by an unassuming older woman. "All right," Sheriff Miller said, gun still raised, surveying the chaos. "What in blazes happened here?" Martha released Thorn, stepping back. "Self-defense, Sheriff. And community cleanup," she gestured towards the control building. "You might find evidence of Thorn's operation in there. Ledgers, maybe some guests he didn't want leaving." Inside, they found the hostages, trafficked individuals Thorn had been holding, along with damning evidence linking him to the wider syndicate and numerous crimes. The case against Marcus Thorn and the Vipers was airtight. As dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised hues, the substation yard was a scene of organized chaos. Ambulances arrived for the injured, police gathered evidence, and the last of the Vipers were being loaded into police vans. Sheriff Miller approached Martha, who was sitting quietly on an overturned crate, watching the activity. Earl and his allies stood nearby, weary but triumphant. "Martha," Sheriff Miller said, holstering her weapon. "My deputies said you took down Thorn and most of his men yourself before we even got here. And those two guys. They look like professionals. Who are you?" Martha looked at the sheriff, a hint of a smile touching her lips. "Just a traveler, Sheriff. Saw something wrong, tried to make it right." Sheriff Miller didn't look entirely convinced, but she also saw the gratitude in the eyes of Earl and the others, the quiet respect they held for this woman. She saw the dog tag tucked under Martha's shirt collar. "You've got a very particular set of skills, ma'am." "Acquired over a long career," Martha replied simply. "In a different kind of service." The air began to clear, literally and figuratively. The smoke from the warehouse fire dissipated. The cloud of fear that had hung over the town for months began to lift. Thorn and his Vipers were gone. The syndicate's attempt to establish a foothold here was thwarted. In the days that followed, the town began the process of healing. The gas station, the diner, the small shops that had been targeted, received help from neighbors. There was a sense of unity, a shared experience of overcoming adversity. The fear was replaced by resilience, a quiet pride in standing up for themselves. Earl's Gas and Sundries became a hub, not just for fuel, but for conversation, for community. People stopped by, not just for coffee, but to talk, to share stories, to feel safe. Martha stayed for a little while longer. She helped Earl clean up the station, quiet, steady work. She sat with the rescued hostages until they could be safely transported, offering a silent, comforting presence. She talked with Earl and the others, not about the fighting, but about the future, about rebuilding. One afternoon, sitting outside the station, Earl noticed Martha looking at the dog tag in her hand. The name, PFCR Miller, was clearly visible. "Someone you knew?" Earl asked softly. Martha nodded. "Served with him. A long time ago. Good kid. Didn't make it home." She closed her hand around the tag. "He believed in protecting the little guy. Believed justice was worth fighting for, even when it was hard." She looked out at the highway, at the dusty road that was now a little bit safer. "Some promises," she said, more to herself than to Earl, "you carry with you. No matter how quiet you try to live." She didn't burst into tears. That wasn't her way. Her way was quiet strength, enduring resolve. The tag wasn't a source of heartbreak here, it was a reminder of purpose, a symbol of the values she fought for, values that had just triumphed. She eventually moved on, as was her way. But she left behind a town transformed. A community that had found its courage, inspired by an unassuming woman who reminded them that true strength wasn't about how much power you wielded, but about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. She came like the dust, cleared the air, and moved on, leaving behind a seed of defiance that would grow strong in the soil she had helped make safe. She was no billionaire, but she had paid a debt far more valuable than money, restoring something priceless, peace, and the knowledge that even the smallest among us could possess the greatest strength. The dusty road was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. It was the quiet of peace earned, not fear imposed. Up next you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Tomorrow we have special story for you. Tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss.